You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
21.5 in 2021.
Welcome back.
It's the show for the professional pilots. My name is Dylan.
And I'm Max.
Welcome back. Max, we took like a month off over the holidays. It felt good.
It did, indeed. But now we're ready to get back after it.
Turns out it's kind of hard to book a guest over the holiday season. So today we're just going to kind of roll with the two of us. No guests, just some thoughts, observations. I think both of us are ready to have a rant about something. We've got some flight advice coming up. Should be a good show. It's good to get back to the microphone in 2021. Let's start it off with the mailbag, which is kind of empty because we haven't been doing anything in a little while, but we did get a nice review from our buddy G Aviator.
He writes, "Great podcast. Thank you for making this podcast so entertaining. I listen to it on my commute to and from work, and it makes me look forward to the drive. Very up-to-date information and great format. We need some more TED." Of course. I'm like riding it up. I'm like, wow, this is cool. And all of a sudden,
Oh, yeah, because you probably hadn't read the review yet.
we need more TED. Punch in the gut.
Well, we appreciate the review, G Aviator. Of course, if you shoot us an email with your mailing address, we'll send you some goodies, info@215podcast.com. And then, do you remember the airfare snacks that they sent us a pouch of snacks to review a little while
The
ago?
healthy snacks.
That's right. They sent us some more, and we figured we should just give them away to one of our listeners. So I'll tell you what, for any folks who can write a review for us in the month of January, in the beginning of February, we'll look at all the reviews, pick one at random, and then we'll ship off the care package to you. So just a little incentive. Rate, review, subscribe, etc. So anyways, a little housekeeping, Max. Did you happen to catch when I was over moderating the NBAA webinar on the COVID vaccine?
No, turns out I was busy that day.
Were you? So a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to moderate a discussion with some very intelligent folks regarding the rollout of the vaccine and concerns that pilots have. And we had a million questions from folks, and we just did about 40 minutes of Q&A from pilots with their questions about the vaccine. I know we've been covering this a lot lately, and we will have a link in the show notes for folks that want to check it out. But it was a great discussion. We had somebody from AMAS on there. We had somebody from the Mayo Clinic Aviation and NBAA Operations. And then we're going to tease another webinar that's going to coming up that you and I are going to both be in, which is on communicating with your principal.
I'm actually looking forward to that.
Yeah. Or as Max calls it, finessing the owner. So
Is that what I call it, huh?
yeah. So that'll be a good one. We haven't got a date scheduled for that one too, but stay tuned. That's going to be really interesting. And I think that's kind of what we're going to talk about today for the most part. Just a lot of these types of topics, right?
Yeah. Well, I just kind of had something going on recently with a fellow aviator, and I called it, again, this is one of those recaps of an organic rant that I called Dylan and went off on the handle. But, it was just one of those things where sometimes pilots are just their own worst enemies. And they just, and usually when it comes to negotiating pay, and Dylan and I have talked about this a lot, where especially if we're talking about business aviation, there's a certain personality type that is very successful in business aviation. Someone that's personable, a good people person, can kind of get along with everybody, and a good problem solver, and all of these things. And a lot of times that personality type is someone is a really nice guy, which is certainly not a bad thing, right?
Would you even say he's a great guy?
Great guy. But when it comes to then having a difficult discussion about pay or something like that with the principal, a lot of times those personalities then are challenged in that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because we see this in all facets of aviation, because I feel like even at the airlines, you still look at this, like pilots are very good at at doing pilot things, and then when it comes to like collective bargaining negotiation and all this other stuff,
but the good thing at the airlines is you have 10,000 pilots, and they found 10 that are the real bulldogs, and they represent everybody.
Even then, though, I don't. I think
no,
like
you're right.
not,
and then nothing's perfect, certainly, but at least it's not every man for itself. There's people that know they're no good at that, so they don't volunteer for that job.
And that's, I think, I mean, we've talked to James O'Neill so often, and that's one of the main things they help people with is salary negotiations, right? And some of those other
and it's hard. I mean,
such a challenge.
I feel like I'm one of those people that maybe has an easier time of coming out and sitting down with a type A personality, high net worth guy, and talking logic and trying to ask for a pay raise or whatever. And it's that doesn't mean it's easy. It's still intimidating. It's still uncomfortable, and it's nerve wracking and everything for me. And so I think that people that maybe don't have as forward of a personality as me, maybe it could be terrifying.
Oh, I would fall in that camp. That is like the last thing I want to do. I am not somebody that likes to ruffle the feathers, and I just want to keep the relationship good, and so that's a real challenge.
Oh my God, do you remember when it came time for you to like quit a job? And for this other job, and you were just having the hardest time resigning.
See, for my personality, that's the hardest things. I've had to leave maybe 2 or 3 jobs, and every time like leaving the job has been the hardest thing that I've had to do professionally.
It is. And the funny thing about it though is the more direct you make it, it usually works out better in the long run. And I'll explain that. So every job in business aviation that I've quit, I haven't done it with an email or a letter. I've called the boss, made an appointment, and sat across the desk from him and told him I was resigning, and these were the reasons why. And knowing a lot of times that you're going to get a pitch for you to stay and increase in salary, and if your mind's made up, you kind of know what you're going to do going into the meeting, I think. But a lot of times I think we've seen at the airport where egos get in the way, and when a pilot quits, these guys take it personal. They get all pissed off, and they're like, he's never going to, but if you come at these guys professionally and like a man, and you look them in the eye and just tell them where you're at, I think that usually earns some respect. And so the people that I've quit from have never been upset that I've left, and I'm still friends with one of them, and the whole thing. And so sometimes making it even more uncomfortable for a small amount of time makes it better in the long run.
Totally agree. I mean, you were actually really helped me when I had to leave a job. I remember, and I set the meeting with the owner, and man, that was probably one of the top 3 most nervous I've been. I had to go down to his office and talk to him, and it was, I don't remember everything I said, but I remember that I was very genuine and direct, and I was able to part ways on a really good note with him. And I'm really glad I did, because you just never know. You
never know. It's never such a small world.
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting. But
so anyway, this guy I was referring to initially, so he's in the situation where he manages and flies an airplane. It's got a couple of owners, and then there's a couple of other guys that had dry leases in place, and now they bought in. So now there's 4 owners. And so they're like, so on the dry leases, per the FARs, as our friend John Clark informed us of, he should be being paid by the dry lessees, right? When they have operators. So he was getting paid in addition to his salary from the owners of the airplane, right? Okay. Well, now they're all together, and now they say, okay, great. Well, and they're basically just expecting him to continue to fly now for 4 owners at the same salary. So in effect, he's taking a pay cut, right? Because he was making a daily rate. Right. So, and I'm like, no. And he's like, he's not saying he's just going to lay down and take it. And he's like trying to figure out what to do. And he's one of the guys with a personality we just described where it's more difficult to try and facilitate it. So I'm, trying to give him the pep talk and be like, come on, you got to go in there. And, they respect these guys. And it's true. The same thing when you resign is when you come in, they respect strength. And a lot of times that's the same kind of strength that you have to have as a PIC when, in effect, the airplane's airborne, you're the boss, right? And you have to be able to stand by those decisions. And you hear all the stories of owners trying to push guys to, keep going without a fuel stop or to get into somewhere where the weather's crummy which is just madness, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. You got to be able to put your foot down and be like, listen, dude, sit down. Here's what we're doing. And this isn't a question. I'm just informing you.
Yeah.
So when we land where we are. What about the guy you flew for goes, I don't usually like to do this, but go ahead and tell him who's on board.
Oh, yeah.
That's the best. But anyway, so
you can use my name.
So I've given him, I'm like, no, I said, be to the point and tell him why you want what you want and make sense of it and this and that. And he goes, yeah. He goes, and he refers to this other guy who's a mutual friend of ours, also a pilot. He goes, yeah. He goes, he was telling me, you always say, don't feel bad for the rich guy.
Right.
Which is what one of I always
That's
love
your
to say
classic
that,
saying, yeah.
These guys, a lot of times, especially in a Part 91 family type flight environment or department, they always end up thinking like, oh, they're the third kid of the owner and like they're part of the family and this and that, which you may very well get that feeling. But don't ever lose sight of the fact that you are still paid to drive the bus. Yeah. At the end of the day, that's where you are. And no matter how many, family dinners and ski trips, in my case, you get invited on stuff, that you're still the pilot. And I'll tell you what, without an airplane, you're probably not going to be around anymore, no matter how much they like you.
Right.
And the other thing too, is these guys will beat up pilots over, $100 a day on a day rate and all this stuff. And act like, and they'll pull the COVID card. Oh, things are so tough right now, this and that. And then they'll pull up in a new Porsche or, plan their big fishing trip or whatever. And you're like, dude. So the thing is that they try and obviously get something. And that's why a lot of these guys are successful in business, because they know how to push and manipulate and wring every drop out of a stone that they can. And so that's where you as the pilot and the guy who is supposed to be in charge, at least part of the time, has to stand up and say, look. And a lot of times I found in my experience personally and with others that ends up going a long way, because those guys only respect one thing, and that's strength.
That's right. Strength.
And it's not that it's not a fine line to walk.
Yeah.
And you can't find yourself out on the street real quick. But so
it's a good point. And I want to circle back to a very relevant topic to which you brought up, which was the, we're going to pay you $100 a day less or whatever for a contract rate or whatever the salary thing is right now. This supply and demand that we have, you're really walking a fine line when it comes to trying to hold the line on these contract rates. And I saw something online the other day that the rate that's really getting hammered right now is like G550 pilots.
Yeah, well, it's such a supply and demand thing.
Yeah,
right.
And that airplane especially is not moving. Those airplanes are not being utilized as much. Because
but then you go to our market on the airplane that I fly.
Yeah, and the light jet is now busier.
We all know everybody who's in the market who does the contract flying. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, there's no one else to call. The one thing you have is when you're in a local market and you jack the rate up $200 and everybody gets pissed off and says they're not going to do it. Their only other option is to call somebody out of state and fly them in and pay extra days and airline. You kind of. So the other thing that pilots fail to realize, I think a lot of times, is the position that they have.
Sometimes. And that's what I wanted to ask you about. I'm a big fan of supply, understanding supply and demand and realizing that is what controls the market. I've always said, like type of aircraft a lot of pilots are tied to, especially in the contract world, like, well, that's a bigger airplane, so that commands a higher premium or whatever. And, that's just a King Air or whatever. So you get paid less for that, when I've always seen it as more of there's a ton of King Air pilots out there. So the King Air pay is less. Right? It's a little bit of both, right?
It's all based an extension of the salary, right? The salary on a 550 is more than it is on a King Air. Yeah. And so logic would have that it's the day rate is but again, do the microeconomics affect that? Absolutely.
A lot of contractors have got to be balancing right now is there's a ton of out of work, Falcon 2000 pilots. How am I, people are going to start
the reality,
undercutting.
though, in business aviation, at least.
I think in some sectors there are. I've been reading a lot about the Gulfstream right now. I think there's just a ton of available talent on the market because there's just not a lot of international flying going on.
But does that mean those guys are laid off, or they're just not doing much, they're available?
I think probably both. I'm just saying, supply for whatever reason is going up. So you and I have both seen rates on airplanes change, up and down, and you say, oh, hold the line, don't cut your pay, or you're trying to raise it. And I'm just fascinated by watching that play out. And there is no hard and fast rule, because if you were getting, $1,200 a day for an airplane, and now it's gone down to $1,100 a day, and you've got to just decide if you're going to keep a higher rate or not. And that's just what's really interesting to me.
Well, if you're going to tie the rate to supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to be willing to jack the rate when there's not a lot of supply and a lot of demand, you probably have to be willing to flex the rate backward when the opposite situation is true. So, pilots are always looking to increase in pay. And so there may be a situation where, you do need to pull it back.
Yeah, that's an interesting balance. And I think what's interesting this time is we're better networked now with social media and the online tools of understanding the marketplace better. All this to be saying, I don't know, this is just my lessons of 2020 looking back, just kind of observations there.
Well, not only that, but also the thing we'd been preaching since the beginning of this podcast, which was things can go down as quick as they go up. And, that became obviously very apparent in 2020, which is the last thing anybody saw coming. So this is one of those ones to put in your back pocket. So in 10 more years, when everything's going nuts and people are hiring as fast as they can, everyone's getting their dream jobs, that the train can come to the station real quick.
A couple other things I wrote down, lessons of 2020 looking back, and this might be an aberration, but I think in general, this is more on the business aviation side. I know this is a little business aviation heavy today. Airplane transactions always seem to happen at the end of the year for tax reasons. This year was insane. 10. And we'll need to have somebody from sales on to talk about it a little bit. But I saw a lot of job opportunities emerging in December, January, like right at this time, because there's so many airplanes changing hands due to, everyone kind of end of year tax, figuring out what they need to do with depreciation and everything else. And it just was something I wanted to put in my back pocket and kind of remind people, like, be ready. I know end of the year, a lot of people are not thinking about job hunting and maybe, focusing on the holidays and doing other things. That could be the time where you could make a move, because that's when the new opportunity can be there. And also, I think what goes hand in hand with that, Max, is definitely networking with sales people.
Yeah, we've talked about that, about the value of buying lunch for your local salesman. But it was just crazy, and not that we're selling airplanes, but again, I'm very good friends with Ken Casey at Pinnacle, who we had on our first episode, right? Wasn't it? And it was just going crazy, and it wasn't a matter if the deal didn't close by the end of the year, then the buyer didn't want it. Yeah. Like it was that. And then they were faced with a potential government shutdown right before the end of the year, which would have because then the Oak City registration doesn't happen, nothing can close. And so that would have blown up tons of deals, and that came through at the last minute.
And a lot of it had to do with changes in the administration too, and uncertainty on some tax laws.
All had to do with that, because the bonus depreciation is assumed to not be available.
But I still think even if there wasn't an administration change, there would still be some,
Yeah, there always is. And somebody that had a liquidity event, that year or whatever, there's always reasons that people are trying to get it done by the end of the year. But.
So just put that under your cap, I think, for next year. And, keep in mind in December, things are happening. Network with those salespeople. One other lesson I wanted to pass along. We get a fair amount of emails from people looking for jobs, looking for help. This has now become the number one thing I tell anybody, especially if they're already in business aviation. They're like, I'm moving to the area. I want a job. Whatever type ratings you have, let's say you're type rated in Bombardier airplanes. If I was moving to a new city, the first thing I would do is get in touch with the OEM salespeople for that brand. So for Bombardier, I would call the regional salesperson for Bombardier, both pre-owned and new, and I would introduce myself and I'd be like, hey, I'm now moving to Dallas and I'm here. Same type of thing. They know about the deals before anybody else, but especially right now when everyone wants somebody that's already rated on the aircraft type, it just seems like that is the easiest, most low-hanging fruit out there at this.
Great advice, Don. I'm sure they're all really going to appreciate that.
Know.
All those sales reps are really going to.
Yep. That's right.
You're going to post all of them in the show notes.
All of them
right?
will be in the show notes for our premium Patreon supporters there. But seriously, though, I mean, I think that should be step one almost.
Yeah. You know? No, it depends on the. Bombardier is a really good example. Yeah. Some other manufacturers may not be quite as pertinent.
Yeah. But me, that's appearing to me to be one of the first things I would do.
Yeah. That goes hand in hand.
So, all right. Last thing I want to rant about now. The Heber Airport. Are you familiar with Heber?
I was just there, like
Salt Lake City,
less than a week ago.
It's the airport that's closest to Lake Park City in Utah. Popular in the winter ski destination. Everyone's nice there, like all the people. FBO's great. I hate
what's your problem?
That airport. It's uncontrolled. It's a circus in the wintertime. There's no straight in approaches, circling only. Bigger airplanes are, category D, can't even circle. There's all this extra work that goes into going in there. All these extra headaches. It's a narrow runway.
75 feet.
75 feet. There's, high terrain everywhere. You can only land one way, take off on the other for a lot of airplanes. The fuel price is twice what it is in Provo or Salt Lake City.
Parking's cheaper, though.
It is literally like 6 minutes closer to Park City than flying into SLC. 12 minutes. It is the dumbest thing. I just, for the life of me, I'm just like, why would you ever go in there?
All right, Dom, let me give you my experience with Heber in the last 7 days.
I'm never going. And then getting out of there, I waited over an hour on the ground because it's one in, one out. There's just, I'm just like, why are we this is dumb. Why would I not go to Salt Lake City with huge runways, ILSs, cheaper gas?
The other thing, don't forget about the plowing situation here too. The airport is the last priority of the municipality to plow. So a lot of times it may snow, the roads are all plowed, and the airport's a mess, and they won't come plow it, or it's you can't get out.
This policy is they will not plow the runway until it is stopped snowing.
Yeah, so and you're in snow country, but
love the people at Heber Airport. FBO's great. They've been very nice to us. I really like the facility there. Everything. For the life of me, I just don't
the other
know.
thing that's crazy too, if you're flying in a big airplane, is when they plow. If it dumps a lot of snow and they plow the runway, the runway is 75 feet wide, so they got these big snow banks on the side of the runway, and you're flying a Gulfstream, which is almost 100-foot wingspan. That's a serious, and they sit high off the ground, like the legacy Gulfstreams at least. Yeah. And so you run the real risk of hitting it with a wingtip. But so I had to go there last week. And the weather was forecast to be crummy, and with the circling approach, high mins, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, we said, okay, we're not going to go into Heber. Let's go to, and the plowing situation, I've had a similar experience too. So I went to Salt Lake, right?
Oh, you did?
Yeah. We dropped off, and then we had to come back, and then I had to do a pickup. So time for the pickup, weather's clear, this and that. And I like just going into smaller, uncontrolled airports.
For sure. And normally I like it, yeah.
It's clearing 1 million, like 14,000 feet. We're 91, so kind of do whatever we want. We canceled IFR, flew over the airport, landed. We were like there was a couple. It was a NetJets plane and a Wheels Up guy or whatever. And so we hung out. People showed up, and my co-pilot's funny. He's like, "How do you get the clearance here?" And I'm like, "Dude, look on the. You got to call the phone number." And I'm like, "We're not going to do that because there's no. You're outside of Class B airspace in Salt Lake. There's really, and we're going south right back to Scottsdale. It's no big deal." I go, just take off. We'll turn left and we'll go direct Flagstaff, climb to 17.5, and then get a clearance. And so we taxied right to the runway, right from the ramp. That was the closest one, 22, blasted off. Really cool, right over the mountains, left turn, picked up our clearance, no problem. We went home. So I couldn't have had more of an opposite experience than you. And you were just there
Yeah.
less than 2 weeks ago, right?
And it was just waiting on the taxiway for an hour for your clearance because, they're launching airplanes one every 15 minutes. And I mean, it's just.
So it's got good days and bad days.
Good days and bad days.
I think with the weather or with the holiday weekend stuff.
It gets back to what we were saying before,
I've never had a time, though, where I've had that big of a delay for a clearance there that I remember.
Here's the thing. We want to talk about lessons learned. December 26th, if you don't know, that's one of the busiest days in business aviation because everyone is done with Christmas and they're going to ski country until New Year's, usually the day after New Year's. It depends on what day of the week it lies. Day after New Year's, typically everyone wants to leave. So this is when ski country gets overloaded, and you have all the delays. And so getting back to what we said before, being a strong PIC and just laying it out to the passengers, being like, look, here are the 7 reasons why it's better that we don't go here. I know it's 6 minutes longer in the car, but
the other thing is too, is you always need to spin it how it's better for them first, if you can, if it is better for them. They don't really care about, everyone says they really care about safety and all this stuff. In the end of the day, their number one priority is if they're going to be inconvenienced. So it's easier if you can just relate it to that first. Be like, we might have to drive 12 minutes longer, but we're going to still save an hour of time waiting in the airplane.
Wow. I think the safety thing's pretty important.
No, I'm not saying it's not. It's first and foremost. My point is when you spinning it to the principal, which this will probably be a topic on our webinar, right? Yeah. It's always best to say, listen, it's going to be a longer drive, but it's going to save you a lot of time in the long run. Yeah. It's just easier to say that than, the approach has really high minimums and it's a circling approach and there's mountainous terrain.
We're category D.
And we're category D, but if I circle at this airspeed, nobody cares. They care that the Suburban can be there to pick them up and they'll be drinking a bottle of wine 30 minutes earlier at the.
Hey, exactly. You got any other lessons from 2020?
I think the only other one, which was for me personally, is that we mentioned it already. It was just be graceful and try and not upset anybody at any point in your career if you can avoid it. Because, like I said, I can tell you,
except for the Heber Airport manager who we just upset.
January 1st of 2020. If I had a dream that I was going to be in Citation XLS Plus ground school in Orlando, Florida, that year, I would have. It's the last thing that could have happened. I would have thought.
Right.
And here we are. So
here we are.
Never say never. You may be going back to a job or an industry that you thought you never would go back to. And it's a small world, ladies and gentlemen.
It is a small world. Well, speaking of small world, we got a little flight advice. You want to read this one?
No, I read the...
okay. I'll read this.
I read the review.
Okay. So flight advice. I am currently a pilot on an account with a management company, but the owner has talked to me several times about leaving the management company and having me manage the airplane myself. I really like working for this aircraft owner, but I am afraid of burning bridges with the management company. Have you guys been through this before? Any advice? And that's from the maybe manager. First off, I think we've both been through this.
Yeah, I know I have for sure.
Yeah,
you have to?
I have too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the great conundrums of aviation.
Okay, so if you are not aware of what a management company is, there are companies that aircraft owners bring their airplanes to, and they say, here, you manage the airplane. You crew the airplane. You manage the maintenance. You basically do everything. And so the biggest names out there for management companies, EJM, Executive Jet Management, which is kind of a wing of NetJets. There's Jet Aviation. You have Solaris, many others. And then there's many those are the national ones. And then there's many local ones as well. Most business aviation airports have a management company, I would say. So what happens is these management companies are then tasked with hiring a crew for an airplane, and then they'll have the crew flying the airplane. And the management company does a ton of work in the beginning. When a new airplane shows up with a new owner, there's a ton of work to be done to get all the paperwork and everything and the operation kind of running. And then once it's up and running, oftentimes the owner of the airplane will be like, you know what do we need this company for? We could just do this all ourselves. And that's kind of what you've seen too, right?
For sure. It's just such a complicated relationship because you're employed by the management company. Yeah. But the owner really, in effect, writes your check because he writes a check to the management company. They pay you. So if he stops writing the check, you're not going to get paid. So who do you really work for? It's a very complicated relationship. And if the management company always thinks that you as the pilot should have all of your allegiance to them, the owner thinks, well, I'm the one paying you. You really work for me, even though you don't. So he thinks that you should have all of your allegiance to him. And the pilot's always caught in the middle.
Exactly. So this is a classic thing that, scenario that happens. Now, we're basically, for folks that aren't familiar with this situation, we're talking about Part 91 because 135 is a different deal because of... Well,
not necessarily, though, because there's lots of times where the owner says, this 135, and they get sour on 135 for whatever reason. And they say, let's just pull it off 135. You manage it. Let's go to 91.
Oh, sure. No,
which is
yeah.
even more complicated because then sometimes
yeah.
there's use tax consequences and all kinds of stuff.
But what I'm saying is if you want to be 135 and continue to be, you have to stick with it. Anyways, we're getting lost in the weeds. So our pilot here that's writing in is kind of stuck here because the owner of the airplane who kind of writes his check is trying to leave the management company, which is who the pilot actually works for. So navigating this situation, like we've been saying earlier in the show about not burning bridges and it's a small world and everything else, what advice do you have for a pilot going through this situation? And then I think maybe you and I can each share our experience of handling this.
And he didn't give us a ton of information because we're going to have to fill in some of the blanks with hypotheticals because a lot of times pilots want to be the hero and be like, look, I can save you money and you don't need to pay these guys. And then they think, well, I can get a raise. If they're paying the management company $5,000 a month, I could get at least $25,000 a year raise. And that saves the owner money. I make more money. Everybody wins. And so the thing is actively trying to pull your owner away from the management company is not a good idea for the reasons we just said. That people do not forget that. And that's not a good, if you want to, you sign up to work for a guy that's with an airplane that's fully managed for the management company. That's what you signed up for. It's not really appropriate for you to try and change and influence change in the relationship. Now, that being said, if the owner comes to you, which is the situation I was in, and said, and a lot of these guys, they're smart guys. They start to put it together and be like, this guy, my pilot seems pretty sharp. And these guys, why can't he do this? And, and so, or a lot of times they will kind of inadvertently start giving you more responsibility that should go on the management company. Yeah. And then it usually comes to a head. So assuming that's the situation here, right?
That's what I'm assuming. And before anyone writes in, I understand there are a million different scenarios. I know there are shady management companies out there. I know there are maybe reasons when a pilot should advocate to leave. Sure. But I'm just talking by and large in general here, assuming you're with a reputable company and, there's nothing shady going on.
Sure. So I think in this situation, my opinion is always honesty is the best policy and just being upfront and saying, if he comes up, say, okay, well, let's sit down and have a discussion about that and what that would entail. And you have to spell it out A to Z that may hurt the relationship with the management company, how that could affect you and him and the operation. And that's going to require more responsibility on your part as the pilot. So that's going to necessitate a pay increase. You put it all out there. And then if that's still the decision to move away from management company, then you guys just have to be upfront with the management company and tell them that's how it went down, and that's the decision they made.
Okay. So my experience was a little bit different. I had this, the same thing. Owner approached me, like, I can't get rid of the management company. You do all the work. I said, look, your relationship with the management company, and if you engage them or whatever, that is your deal. If you want to sever your relationship with them, I don't want to be involved. You work that out with them. And then once that's done, then if you want to talk to me, I'm certainly capable of helping you, but I don't want any part of what you're about to do. Leave that out of it.
Here's the problem. When you do that and you go full hands off like that, is that a lot of management companies in their management agreement with the owner, there's language in there that, to dumb it down, essentially says that if they leave, they can't take the pilot.
Exactly.
Your employees.
That was the next thing I was going to say.
So you can find yourself out of a job after they already leave and say, "Well, wait a minute. What do you mean? I can't bring the pilots?"
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
So that's
really
why
good point.
Sometimes those are things that you need to, when I say lay it all out, be like, let's look at the agreement. What does it say? How does that work out for me?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that's a good point. No,
assuming
that's a
you
really
want
good
me
point.
to come, you
Yeah,
know?
right. Yeah.
But that's the situation we had.
Yeah.
And that was a hang up. And then we found that there was a loophole in the language where we were able to
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. See, that was not my experience. There was no language like that. So I guess that's why it worked in my scenario. But yeah.
But that's also a valid tactic, I think, too, which you're absolutely right. You never engage the management company. So is it your job to disengage them?
No.
But just make sure.
So I stayed out of it. And I unfortunately still have a good relationship with that company to this day. In the lesson that I think we've both learned, airplane owners come and go. Reputable, good management companies tend to stick around.
That's right.
So to me, that's a very important relationship I don't want to damage. So there could be a good way, Mr. Maybe Manager, to do this. Couple other considerations, I think, especially if you're with a really big management company, there's a lot of pricing power that those management companies have that you will lose. If you leave.
Look at the benefits that that the principal's company provides versus the management company, because a lot of times you'll be very surprised.
So I don't know. There's a lot to weigh there. It's not just a no-brainer. I mean, I get the thing is, a management company, of course, they're never going to be able to manage a single airplane as good as one person that's dedicated just to that airplane will. I mean, it's just, they're managing a multitude of airplanes, and they don't have probably one person dedicated exactly like a full-time pilot is.
But that being said, that pilot that managed it also has to have a lot of knowledge in other areas that you don't just as a pilot, because they have a director of maintenance who's an expert in maintenance. Yeah. If you're the pilot manager, guess what? You have to figure out how to become sort of an expert in maintenance.
Sure.
And so it depends on the guy or gal as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a real loaded question, and it's a classic one we see all the time. So hopefully we gave you a little advice that you can use. Max, we should mention our sponsors. It's all of the major management companies in the United States. They support the No, I'm just kidding. You're looking at me like, what?
I was like, really? When did that happen?
I was just joking, because it sounds like we're very pro-management company.
It's just because pilots like to villainize the management company. Yeah. And now, after done this long enough, we realize that can not be such a good attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just trying to pass on lessons learned in 2020.
The point of the podcast is sometimes to make you think about things you hadn't thought about.
Yeah, exactly. And learn from our mistakes. That's right. I guess we actually should talk about our real sponsor for the show, which is our friends over at Harvey Insurance. Some of the things that we don't like to think about, we've tried to avoid thinking about. Losing your medical is one of them, right? And that's something you can actually protect against. You can buy insurance. You can't buy insurance for your boss wanting to sell the plane or leave the management company or anything else, but you can buy insurance to protect that if your medical gets suspended or revoked or whatever, you can still have some income. I think that's a pretty good deal for professional pilots.
Very important.
Visit harveywatt.com. Get all the information. You can sign up online. They have a cool tool now. You can go in there and then say, I'm X amount years old, and this is the type of coverage I want. Because they have two coverages. They have the shorter term one, and then they have the long term one.
For 5-ish years usually, and then when it takes you all the way to 65.
Takes you all the way to 65. So you can kind of figure out, what would my monthly cost be? And then some people roll that in and they get that covered by their employer. Some people pay for it themselves because they like the ability to keep the policy with them, because employers change. So lots of good options. HarveyWatt.com. Thanks for sponsoring the show.
Anybody else that's interested in sponsoring the show, info at 215 Podcast. We are actively seeking new sponsors in 2021.
Any other lessons learned from our listeners for 2020? I'd love to hear some feedback. I'd like to see that mailbag full for next episode. Just let us know. What did you figure out? We've been through a black swan event. We're starting to maybe come out the other side.
I'd like to hear from some of the guys that were relatively less than 12 months at a regional airline. Because that's a lot of times I feel like when we preach about things can change so quickly in this business. That's who we're talking to. That's like our target, because that was us back then, not thinking that. And then that was us back then. That was what was our black swan was 08, the financial crisis, right? So, and we had seen 9/11 not too far before we were at that, like less than 5 years till we basically came to the regionals right between two black swan events, right? So I don't know that we really learned. I didn't really learn from 9/11 and what had happened. I did a little bit because I tell a story about when I was an intern and those guys saying, "Oh, this is so great," and then everything went to hell a month later. But that's the people. So I'd like to hear from those guys and be like, "Yeah, you know, I never thought."
Well, I mean, now think about these folks who've been furloughed for a few months, and now that second PPP deal went through, right? Now they're getting recalled. Aren't they?
Yeah.
Right. While they're trying to been working on getting other employment, and now that's just making it worse in a way, right?
Well, one of my buddies, they come back. He hasn't flown for 6 months. They're like, "Yeah, you get one refresher sim, then you're up for the check ride." But then in March, we're not sure what's going to happen.
But then you're just going to go right back. So we know that you've been networking your butt off.
But it's like, why make them come back to take a check ride and get requalled? Like, who does that help? If you think you're just going to let him go again in March, just write the check. Let the guy stay home, or gal. Right?
I mean, it just seems like it's just imagine all the people that have been listening to our show, taking the advice, doing all the networking, maybe finally have worked up to getting an interview, and now they've got this thing torpedoing them.
People are like, well, they're getting the money for free. It's not like they're recalling us out of the goodness of their heart. They already cut us loose. Like, just
that's a tough one. We'd love to hear.
Everybody's getting out the contract. And trying to figure out.
Love to hear from folks that are going through that, because we
know one.
Do we?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's get them on the phone for next episode. I think we need to get Ted on the phone for next episode too. I think it's about time to hear
about Ted's lessons from 2020.
Yeah. Oh, geez. They're all going to be having to do with home renovations and cat husbandry.
It's better to walk your cat on a harness than it is on a collar.
Your cat's feet get cold in the wintertime, so I put little booties on them. All right.
Let's wrap this up.
Yeah, story time. You alluded to something last time about some crossing you did and all sorts of hijinks.
Oh, yeah, the Goose Bay boondoggle. So we're going to Europe. We're going into Zurich, Switzerland. So we fly from Scottsdale we were stopping in Goose Bay that time. I can't remember why, but versus either Goose Bay or Gander. So we go into Goose Bay. We leave here. It's the middle of the night, midnight or 2 a.m. or something in Goose Bay when you land. So we're maneuvering to land, and we're on base to final, and I was not flying that leg. And so I go to fire up the APU because it's a quick turn off. There's nobody there, and you run into the ramp. So I get the APU fired up, right? So I hit the button and notice nothing happened. I'm like, that's weird. So I turn it off, turn it on again, and reset the ECU, hit the button, nothing.
So you're pushing the start button.
Start
and
button,
no
nothing
rotation.
spinning.
There's not okay.
So I just reach up, turn it off, and I don't say anything because the other guy's flying, and we're on final, and so I'm bringing it up after we land. So we land, we clear the runway, and I go, "Hey, APU's not starting." And he's like, and so I flip it on again, try it again, nothing. And then all of a sudden, of course, what does he do? Turns it off, turns it on again. And we taxi in. So I'm like, all right. And we're a plane full of people. Goose Bay is a super small town in Canada. It's free. It's in the winter because we're going on a ski trip in Europe. That's right. And so it's cold. It's miserable. I'm like, we're in a bad spot right now. Right. And so I go, when we get to the FBO, let's just set the brake, leave the motors running. Let's just think about this for a minute before we commit. Because as you know, when you shut the motors down, we're committed, right? We're potentially dead.
Turns out you can't hand prop a Gulfstream.
Yeah. So we pull in the ramp, we set the brake, and I get on the FBO and I call him on the radio. I said, "Hey, do you guys have a air start cart?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, we got one of those." And he goes, "Yeah, but it's broke right now." And I'm like, "Does anybody else have one, or the one you can borrow from the airlines or anywhere?" He goes, "No, that's the only one." So I'm like, "All right, so that's out." And so I wait another 10 seconds, and I said,
"Now, quick question for you: was this pre Buddy Hose?
Yes, this was pre-buddy. This is one of the reasons I got the buddy hose. Okay. Probably the reason I got the buddy hose. But anyway, so I key the mic and I go, "Are you guys allowed to hot fuel?" And he goes, "Oh, let me check." Because they have a lot of military stuff that tech stops there too. And he comes back, goes, "Yeah, we can hot fuel you." I'm like, "All right, we'll let you know." So I talked to the other pilot. I'm like, "All right, dude, here's the only idea I have." I said, "Let's shut down the left motor, deplane everybody." And we have a slot time into Zurich too. So we got there and I gave us about an hour on the ground to fuel. I had food being delivered to the FBO for us to take. And that way, because we had to launch really precisely, because it was like, I don't remember, 10 minute, I think it's a less than 10 minute window it was. Okay. Something like that, 10-ish minutes, right? We had to be arriving in Zurich. So we had to depart, right on the money. Right. And so we shut down the left motor. I call the boss up. I'm like, "Here's the deal." And I go, "Here's my plan. You guys go inside, stay there. Don't come back to the airplane until someone comes to get you." And luckily, our buddy Ken Casey was on the jump seat.
Oh, that's right.
So I'm like, "Ken, I'm going to need you to just kind of shepherd the passengers and go get everyone when it's time to go." Yeah. And so we bring the fuel truck out, and we needed, of course, there's winds. We needed every drop of gas we could, put on the airplane. So passengers all go into the FBO and they're hanging out there, and we got the right engine idling. It burns 1,000 pounds an hour, by the way, in a G3 at idle per side. So we're burning 1,000 pounds an hour at idle, and we're sitting there and we got the fuel truck cut. I'm like, "Guys, we need to have the lab dump too. We've got 12 people. It's one lab." So we had the lab dump and while the engine's running, and then they came in, they fueled us with the motor running, and we waited, and I'm like, I'm trying to back the time. I'm like, how long does it take these guys to get out here? And I'm like, I want to get topped off right before the passengers come out.
Oh, right.
So they topped us off once with the big fuel. And I'm like, "Guys, don't go anywhere. I'm going to need you to top it off one last time." And so we back it up. We figure out the timing. They top us off. I call Ken. I'm like, "Bring everyone out, bring the pizzas, whatever." So everyone comes out, gets in the jet. We close the door, we cross bleed, start it, and we taxi the runway. We blast off. We go into Zurich. It's just freaking really bad storm. It was just raining in Zurich. So we fly this approach to bare ass minimums. We've been flying for 12 and a half hours, all the crap in Goose Bay. But we're going to Zermatt. I'm stoked. The other pilot doesn't ski. So he's like, "Look, dude, I'll stay here. I'll deal with the plane and get it fixed." He goes, "You go to Zermatt, have a great time. You and Ken." So we're like, "All right, perfect." So we land. We were like, it's Jet Aviation, which is a Gulfstream company, right? So this should be no problem. We're going to the jet. They'll fix it up. We got a week. So we get in. Kenny and I get on the train. We go up to Zurich or to Switzerland, to Zermatt. We spend the night, all this stuff. Then the other pilot calls the next morning early, and we had been out late and everything. And so he's like, "I got bad news. They can't fix the plane here. We got to go to Basel, which is a 20-minute flight." I'm like, "Dude, are you serious?" He's like, "Yeah," because in Europe, for those of you that don't know, the mechanics almost have to have something very similar to a type rating on each type. So you can't just have any mechanic AMP come.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, so we didn't have a G3 guy at Jet in Zurich. So
hard to believe EASA makes it difficult.
No way. So I pull it together and get some stuff, and I get back on the train for this long train ride back to Zurich, and we get in the jet. They had an air start cart, so we air start it, blast off, fly over to Basel. We land in Basel, and so basically what had happened is the shaft had sheared on the sprag clutch had come apart.
Okay.
So we need this part. So we go, "Yeah, great. Oh, perfect. We're on MSP. This is great." Yeah. So we call MSP's like, "Oh, well, you're behind on your billing," which is paid by the management company. And so we're like, so that was a whole thing. So I had to get wire them a payment. So then they would send the part, had to come, and there was none in Europe. So it's come from the States, yada, yada, yada. So anyway, we went to Basel, we got it fixed. As soon as we got to Basel, I got back on the train, went back to Zermatt. We skied. The other pilot handled the maintenance situation, and we ended up, what did we do? I don't remember. Now I don't remember if we repositioned the airplane back to, I don't know what we did, but
you got to solve problems. And that's why the folks in business aviation get paid the big bucks.
Yeah.
You gotta
if
make
you
it
could
happen.
talk about the complete opposite scenario of being an airline pilot, and it's like, oh, that sucks. Well, sounds good. I'm supposed to be off tomorrow, so you guys figure that out. Let me know where you need me to be.
Call the van for the Holiday Inn Express. We're on our way.
Bye.
So yeah, that actually is the best. You should we go speak at aviation schools and tell that story. Be like, all right, kids, do you want to sign up for this? But see, like to me, I enjoy that kind of stuff though, like solving problems and doing that. And it's just like, it's new. It's
Yeah, I did too. And especially when it goes like that and you really,
yeah. And you find a solution.
yeah, and you find a solution and you make a good pivot and you ended up making it happen.
It's cool. And other people listening to the show are like, that sounds like the worst possible thing. I would never want to deal with that. So that's good.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to know themselves and find their right fit, their best fit. So, man, that's good. I don't know. I think I got everything off my chest I needed to.
Good.
Except,
So when are you going back to Heber?
God, I like the people at Heber.
See,
I
you sound like
the
you sound
FBO.
like you should be an airline pilot. You just go to Salt Lake, take vectors to the ILS.
My point is,
what's the problem?
It's that it actually takes longer. That was the whole point. It's a bait and switch. You're like, oh, it's closer, but it's not.
I know it's not like Aspen versus Grand Junction or Telluride versus Montrose.
Yeah,
or
exactly
Eagle versus Centennial situation.
No,
right?
it's the appearance of time saving when it's not. And I love all the people there are lovely, but I'm good.
I just find it funny that you get so.
I know. It's so dumb. We're gonna get all this hate mail from everybody now, and just stupid. I don't know. It's just
we're talking about people that have real problems, Dylan, that are getting.
I know. And here,
effective pay cuts and how to negotiate, and the thing that spools you up is having to wait for an hour at the.
Just wait till I remember we mentioned this once to Jason. And when we were talking about Aspen and about my dream of like having this big ski country airport on the top of what's the mountain? Red Table Mountain in Aspen, and how I want to level that mountain and have a high speed rail.
Dude, it's called Leadville. I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I'm getting myself in trouble on this one. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for 2021's first episode of the 21.5 podcast. It's the show for professional pilots.
Professional pilots by two professional pilots. We've got a couple of good interviews lined up in 21. Exciting stuff. We want to get more into the weeds of some just really down in the mechanics of some geeky aviation stuff.
We're looking forward to it.
Great.
We love hearing from you. Remember,
some stories. Anybody who has some stories.
Absolutely.
Show yourself.
We love hearing from you. If you've got any topics you want to learn about, you just want to touch base, or if you wrote us a review, shoot us an email. It's info@215podcast.com. We've got some merch to send you, and write a review for us, and we'll draw somebody's name out of a hat for that snack bag from our friends at Airfare. Until next episode, Max, will you remind these people what they need to do?
Ladies and gentlemen, flexibility. It's the key to air power.
Especially when you're trying to ski in Zermatt.
First world problems.
That's right.
See you guys.
See you guys.
Black Dog.